Would an arrest warrant suffice, Mrs. Tejada?
Diana Tejada, stand up. You are under arrest for possession of an illegal narcotic with intent to distribute.
Not everything is as it seems on the surface. Hidden between the lines when it comes to deal in the streets are consequences, favors for a favor, or people making deals behind your back. But are men in suits any better than those who deal drugs in the streets? When you're making deals with men in suits on pieces of paper rather than a gun, there's always a small print. The terms and conditions that none of us read, but that's where they get us. At least in the street life, you know what the terms and conditions are. It's pretty much do or die with a gun in your face. In Deal or No Deal, on the surface, Lucas and Weston Holdings isn't what it is. It's a giant Ponzi scheme, and just like RSJ once said, everyone has two faces. But isn't that the world we live in? Financial institutes to businesses we invest our money in. Who's in control? So one thing Tariq doesn't have control over now is his trust fund. He gave that to Weston Holdings, and shit is about to get real if he loses everything his father worked so hard for. Weston Holdings is also a place which holds the Tejada's legit money, and sooner or later Brayden is going to have a choice to make. Deal or No Deal is also about control, power, information, and leverage. I also once said that information is power, and holding information in Ghost is like holding a smoking gun. And that's where we are in episode 7. Information is key, from Diana busting Salik fake Freeman to Monet taking out 2 in 1. Law enforcement are also connecting the dots from all three supplies from Stansfield, the Jamaica Ave boys, and Wall Street. But will they get what they want from Diana? Now, this episode kicked off with the Russians attacking the Tejada Street operation. They wipe out the Jamaica Ave boys, and they weren't hiding. They sent a message directly to Kane, telling him he's gonna lose this war. They're at war with the Russians because of one man, Gordo. In my breakdown for episode 6, I said Gordo was the one who fed the information that it was the Russians, which may have raised some questions, but it made sense from Drew's reaction to Gordo trying to make sure the heat wasn't on himself. Now, Monet wanted Gordo to back off Drew, but Gordo declines. Instead, he told Monet how it was gonna work, and so it was never gonna end well for Gordo. But the way in which Monet was able to create this master plan of not just killing Kai, settling the beef with the Russians, but also having Gordo taken off the chessboard, it was smart, strategic, but also evil in a way she was manipulating her kids. With the attack from the Russians, that meant the product needed to come off the streets, and Kane was handling shit. But Tariq was still pissed about everybody's betrayal, so when Brayden and Kane were kicked out of the room, Monet told Tariq exactly what he needed to hear.
You should be thanking whoever took her ass out.
Unfortunately, Tariq was doing the complete opposite of thanking Effie, but we're gonna get to that later on. They had problems with the Russians, and Tariq's plan was to find out from the Castillos about when the next Russian drug shipment would come in, so Tariq could handle it from his connections. So information, power, and someone with a lot of influence was about to come into play. Now, their plan was to take the Russians off the streets, but it would only work if the Castillos played ball, which some of them were against, and it took Gordo convincing them to play ball. Now, Tariq also played his part by feeding the information to Rashad Tate about the Russian drug shipment, and even though Tate hesitated at first because he knows how Tariq St Patrick works and how he's hot with law enforcement, he needed to get his campaign numbers back up, and this was a win-win situation for both. Rashad Tate would get the credit for the bust, and Tariq gets the Russians off the streets, which would stop them from taking over their turf. But Monet also had other ideas, and Lorenzo definitely warned us about how she never shows her hand.
Your mother never shows her hand, Kane. You of all people should know that.
So this pretty much sums up the chess moves Monet put in play when Gordo refused the direct orders at the beginning. But it all started by moving the pawn off the first square with Kai. She wanted Kai's help with the Russians, a mutual enemy. But even though both of their lives would have been easier if they were put down, Kai just didn't have the bodies at this moment in time. They were all roped up. Now, I think we should all know Monet by now. She'll use by any means necessary to get what she wants. She understands, as a woman playing in a man's world, she needs to level the playing field. And the only way to do that is to play with what Kai sees in his eyes, and that's Monet Tejada. She's also teaching something very similar to Drew when it comes to Gordo. She tells him make sure he's always got Gordo's ear, and not the Castillos. But where Drew was saying him and Gordo could actually be real, this was never gonna last, and Monet knew it. For Monet, it was all about power and control, and to get those two things, Gordo was unfortunately in the way, because she saw the twinkle in Drew's eyes, and she couldn't have any loose ends, especially the man who killed Lorenzo. As they came to visit Kai, this was very reminiscent of season 1, except this time, Kane wasn't falling for Monet's manipulation. In season 1, she said that she could always count on Kane, but Kane is someone who knows what 2 + 2 is.
Boom! 2 + 2 is 4!
He definitely knows that Monet had something to do with Lorenzo's death, but he knows now's not the right time because he's thinking about family first, and so is Monet, but in her own devilish way, because she knows she needed to do something to cover her tracks. In this conversation, we did get a sense of how Monet felt around Lorenzo. She felt when he was locked up, she was the one who held the business down, but when he came out, she was pushed aside, and after he kills Zeke, she's not exactly grieving his loss. But this is what Monet does. She plays on Kai's desires, and when he lets his guard down, she tries to strike as we hear gunshots in the background, but it took Kane to come in and help take care of Kai. Now Monet definitely had a few chess moves up her sleeve. The first was to take out Kai and deliver him to the Russians to squash their beef, and now the Russians and the Tejadas are no longer at war. But the other was to also set Kai to take up for Lorenzo's death. But that's not all. She set it up in a way where Kai was working with someone to kill Lorenzo, and that someone who she texted was Gordo. Just when Drew seems like he finally got someone by his side, things took a dark turn. As they say, you ain't a real killer till you kill someone you love. So Drew messaged the person Kai was supposed to have been working with, and unfortunately for Gordo, his phone buzzed while he was in the shower, and this is when it dawned on Drew. Gordo was the one who killed Lorenzo, so he did what needed to be done. In tears, Drew killed someone he loved, and this is gonna change him. I expect to see a more ruthless and savage Drew, a real mean streak that we've only seen in glimpses, but now it's game time. Now, when it comes to family in episode 7, there were a few major twists and turns, secrets and betrayals which I'm going to come to in just a moment, but one man who's actually stuck to his word is Kane. As Effie saw the camera on the roof, she messaged Kane, and he came good on his promise, although it wasn't good enough for Effie to pay for her tuition, but this is where Kane offers to help a lending hand.
I said no. I'm not gonna be your little charity case. I'll figure something else out.
Now, even though Effie declines, this is where Kane made another move that was very similar to what Mecca did in season 2. If you guys remember, Mecca paid Davis his fee to look after Zeke, and we saw Kane do that with Effie's tuition. Now, what it meant for Monet and Zeke in season 2 was that they were completely reliant on Mecca, and does the same now go for Effie? Law 11 from the 48 Laws of Power says learn to keep people dependent on you, so is Effie now dependent on Kane? Although we do have to say, as much as she refused the cash, she actually liked the gesture, and we may even actually see this relationship turn into a bit of romance. Now, from family being there for each other in the street game to family secrets with Weston Holdings, I always maintained Kiki was someone who was always hiding something from Brayden, but it first started with her confronting Brayden about his and Tariq's business. But her reaction wasn't what he expected. She said it was pretty genius, but that's also because she has two faces herself.
A private floor. Supposedly there's more, but it's the only one I have the code for.
So this was a clue that was left in episode 2, that Weston Holdings has more private floors. So as Brayden was trying to repair Crash Coin servers, he noticed someone coming out of a closet with bags of shredded paper. Now it's late at night, and Brayden thought, what's going on? So we saw an intrigued Brayden push into a secret passageway, and he finds a set of stairs, and finds himself in one of those secret floors at Weston Holdings, which holds a such shit ton of files, evidence that's being shredded, and books where numbers just don't seem to add up. He takes these books and tells Kiki that these books have 2 separate deposits and withdrawals, and the balance sheet don't add up. But when she tells him he's crazy, he takes it to Lucas, and this is where shit gets real.
I need that money back, and Tariq's trust fund too.
That's not how this works.
Tariq St Patrick's trust has been moved to Weston Holdings, and so is the Tejada's legit cash, as well as around 2 million, and I can't imagine it ending well for either Tariq St Patrick, the Tejadas, or even Brayden himself. Imagine when Tariq finds out everything he'd been working towards is gone, taken by Lucas Weston. Not only will Lucas and Kiki catch a bullet, but Brayden will definitely owe them one, big time. And I really do get the feeling Brayden's gonna have to make a choice between his actual family and his street fam. Now with Salim Arshay Fake Freeman, we finally get down to the bottom of who he is, but that was after the cringe poem and him trying to blackmail Diana, where he completely changed his tune when Diana rejected him. He confronted her about fucking Tariq St Patrick, someone who he called a piece of shit and a drug dealing murderer, but that's not all. He threatened her about how he knew she was moving weight through the candy shop, but that was the wrong move. In this conversation with Monet, she offered to come to Stansfield to deal with Salim, and Diana said she was just like Monet, so she'll deal with it, and she did.
Salim Arshay Freeman.
That shit sounds made the fuck up, my brother.
Google definitely goes both ways, and Diana found out Salim Fake Freeman is actually Trevor Nelson, who was adopted by 2 rich parents, and so Diana got her way. But I still do have one question. Why did Salim change his name, and why is he exactly trying to hide his past? Now over to the RICO and the events that led to Diana's arrest. We had Tariq talking to Lauren, with Tariq trying to gain Lauren's trust. She tells him that they're saying he's a killer and a monster, but he says he was made into one, which is rich coming from someone like Tariq St Patrick, when Ghost gave him all the opportunities he never had or turned down when he was a kid. Now Tariq knew he had to do something to gain Lauren's trust back, but not before he made a phone call to Davis after he met Rashad Tate, where Tariq told Davis Sax either doesn't know about the Lauren case or he's lying. But it's clear from this conversation Tariq's still keeping his cards really close to his chest. He hasn't even told Davis about Lauren. Now for Tariq to gain Lauren's trust, Tariq had to do something which I think will create a bit of a debate in the comment section. He had to record Effie confessing. He also told her that he wanted a picture of Noma and her daughter so he could use it as leverage, but this conversation turns pretty nasty pretty quick. Effie tells him that she took care of Lauren to protect him, and I still have to agree with Effie, because if she didn't attempt to kill Lauren, then Lauren would have been his downfall, but Tariq didn't exactly thank her like Monet said he should have. He replied with, "She's damaged." Now, law enforcement were piecing the puzzle together with Junior, Paz's son, who seems like he's joined the task force, and they put Rashad Tate's face right up next to Tariq St Patrick, and they were connecting the dots from the Russians attacking Tariq's supply and Tariq using Tate to take out the Russians, but they had one problem. They couldn't connect the dots back to Tariq St Patrick. They needed to figure out how he was moving his weight, and Blanca Rodriguez set her eyes on Weston Holdings. Now, this was Junior who was digging around Weston Holdings' trash, who picked up one of the coffee cups which Brayden and Tariq used to transport their drugs through No Cap All Frap. These came back as the same match as what the Jamaica Ave boys were selling, and also what they found on Stansfield rooftop, which means all three pipelines were connected. But that's not all. Effie was also caught on Stansfield's rooftop, and she'll be next in line after Diana. Now, what also came out of this conversation was that Lauren was ready to testify, but Tariq wanted to play her the recording before she talks. Now, Tariq knows that money talks, and working for law enforcement where people put their lives on the line every single day may not pay as handsomely as on the streets. So as he was able to cleverly get into the building where Lauren was, he played her the recording, and now she believes him. So she's gonna hold them off for as long as possible, but that's not all.
Sachs is working with the feds.
Sachs is a fucking mom.
Now, throughout episode 7, Davis continued to question Sachs, and we even heard Sachs telling Jenny Davis seems to know something. But we did see Sachs turning on Jenny, saying he'll burn her if he blindsides or lies to her again. Although Sachs is someone who's on the right side of justice, he wants to do what those in power couldn't, including him, bring down a St. Patrick. Now, this is where shit starts to get complicated for Sachs, especially now that Theo's released. In season 2, he said that he'd do anything to save Davis, and now that Sachs's cover has been blown, I expect to see this next week. Now, I'm sure the Tejadas would love a peaceful family dinner for once, but this dinner table will look emptier as each season goes by. There's no Lorenzo Tejada, no Zeke Cross, and for the time being, no Diana. This episode ends with DA entering the Tejada household, and they surround the remaining Tejadas, and Jenny presents them with an arrest warrant for the one and only Diana Tejada.